Thanks to all of you who want to stick this out. First question I have is, raise your hands if you weren't here for the presentation yesterday. 1, 2, okay. Very small number of people. So I'm going to skim through the stuff that we talked about yesterday, and then after that I will let our crack finance team talk about the really interesting stuff, which is the numbers. Also, before I there's only stairs are on that side. Yeah.
Yeah, stairs.
That side. Okay. Before I get started, also, I'd like to ask if anybody has any specific questions or concerns that you'd like us to focus on while we're going through this. Why don't you step up to the mic and let us know so we can address them as we go through the presentations. Even have paper to write them down on. Okay. All right. It sounds like everybody's all excited and ready to just go ahead. So here goes. If we do this quick, we can all go out and get our beer earlier. Okay. These are the same slides we did yesterday, pretty much. We're going to spend a few minutes going through what we talked about yesterday to refresh both of you who weren't here, talking about the implementation plan and all that. We're going to spend a lot of time on the budget stuff because that's new, and we didn't have time for that yesterday, and a lot more detail of how we intend to go forward. And then we'll have lots of time for questions at the mic, people to run up here and give us checks, that sort of thing. Oh, here we go. Here's the outline. Yeah. Okay. So again, we'll talk about what NANOG is now, what we intend for it to become, and then how to get there from here. So right now, NANOG provides forums in the North American region for education and sharing of knowledge for the Internet operations community. Conferences, mailing lists. Nothing new there. NANOG is an activity of merit network. That is the big thing that we're intending to change in doing this. Being an activity of merit has a bunch of implications in terms of the way we operate and our ability to self-govern. Ultimately, merit, it's an activity of merit. Merit signs the contracts. Merit has the money. Merit has the risk. Merit gets to tell us how things are going to run. If we want to spend $10 million buying a corporate jet, they'll tell us no. That sort of thing. Of course, so yeah, we won't do that. Governance, we have these committees, Program Communications Marketing Working Group, and of course the Steering Committee that do a lot of the stuff that we see here, get the programs going, get money flowing in, keep the mailing list running. So these are self-governance for institutions that were generated in 2005. The big thing, though, is that since it's Merit's money, Merit tells us ultimately has the authority to decide what to implement and not to implement. So, big question, why are we doing this? We have a working governance model but limited ability to act. I think we've shown over the last 5 years since the transition, with a couple swaps out of personnel, that we are actually pretty capable of making decisions that for the good of the community and for the good of the conferences and all that, that will lead us in good directions. We want to take that a step further by becoming an independent legal entity with our own sources of funding, our own financial management and control, and most importantly, a membership, which is you guys. And the corporation is owned by the members, and members by electing board and choosing bylaws and that sort of thing tell us how to operate. So removes a layer of indirection. Here's the flowchart from yesterday, moving from the activity of merit to a corporation. Nothing that I haven't already said. Except perhaps at the bottom one that's important to note is right now all the backroom stuff, the setup for this, making sure things happen, bills get paid, hotels get contracted, the systems stay up, the lights are on, is done by Merit. We believe that through some combination of contracted services and very limited paid staff of our own, we can accomplish the same things without disrupting things. So we're not intending to hire a whole bunch of people to duplicate exactly what Merit does. That would be pointless. So let's see. The mission stays the same. We're still doing education outreach in the North American region, holding conferences, holding a mailing list. Gives us the opportunity to expand into more areas if we, or you, the membership, see fit. Things like industry formalization, more education and outreach beyond the conferences, that kind of thing. Governance, we have already created a board of directors for the new corporation that is the 6 current elected steering committee members. At least for the short term, we intend to keep those 2 sets of people the same. The new bylaws, which will be written in the next few months, will decide going forward how that should be structured. Right now, it was easiest to have the 6 people become the 6 board members. We might want, people writing the bylaws might choose to expand the board, shrink the board, all sorts of possibilities. Let's see. Membership is important too, because we want the people who participate to be enfranchised to make the decisions, and that it can't be limited to the people who just show up to the meetings. That we want people who participate only via the mailing list to be enfranchised as well. A lot of people can't make it to every meeting or even some meetings and want to participate. No reason why they shouldn't be allowed to. Funding, we'll expand our funding sources. Right now, most of the revenue is from meetings, either your registration fees or the dollars paid to sponsor the breaks outside, that sort of thing. We believe we can increase our sources of funding, make it more broad, diverse, and less dependent on the attendance at any individual specific meeting. Also in doing so, that means we can keep the meeting costs at a reasonable level and not up at the Cisco networkers level or interop or that kind of thing. There's an order of magnitude difference there. Membership, we've been talking about that a bit. We definitely want to have a paid membership who are empowered to vote in the elections. There's been talk about what the membership will mean, what benefits there will be, aside from being able to say, I'm a NANOG member. It won't be terribly expensive. We'll have to provide ways for people on limited budgets like students to be able to join in and participate. Maybe meeting discounts come as a right, that sort of thing. Conferences and mailing lists. So as I said before, we want to increase the sponsorship to help keep the attendee costs down. We'll contract out some of the logistics that are being handled now by Merit so that we don't have to do it ourselves or hire people to do it. But we will keep the management aspects of it in the corporation and participation through various committees and things that you all are going to be asked to join in and help out on. And let's see, timeline and budget. So this is the end of the very brief recap from yesterday. So again, I'll ask if anybody has any questions or anything we didn't think of that they want to talk about. And I don't see anybody rushing to microphones. Randy's in the different room. And all right then. Sylvie, you want to? Oh, there's somebody at a microphone.
So I wasn't here last night, but I was just Ole Jacobson from Cisco. Excuse me. I just wonder why you decided on the membership model rather than, say, for example, what the IETF has, where there is no membership, and there is an umbrella organization, of course, which is, you could say, well funded. But did you actually need the funding of the membership model to keep going on a continuous basis? Is that the reason for the?
That wasn't the reason. The member dollars certainly don't hurt, but I think it's not necessary for the survival. The main reason I think for doing it is that it empowers the people who choose to be members to participate in the governance of NANOG in a way that being part of a bigger organization can't. That's really why I see it. It means that you, by becoming a member, get to vote on who your officers are, who your board is, what the bylaws look like, and help shape the direction of the organization.
And
Right.
it does bring a little more dollars in than just the hand to mouth. Everything currently is structured. The funding for the activity that is NANOG is all based on what goes on here at the conference. And that limits, if you recall all the discussions we've had in the past at community meetings about, maybe we have different numbers of meetings a year. The budget does not work if you are trying to tune some of those variables without having any other cushion or input vector.
I'll also say one other thing, which is that there was some stuff floating on the mailing list about needing to be a member to participate in the mailing list or come to conferences, and I don't believe anybody has any intention of actually doing that. So I see Dan, I think, in the back there.
Just some thoughts on the membership front. This isn't really a new idea. I think someone dug up an email thread with Tom Scholl suggesting this in 2004. So, this has been around for a while. And there's, I think, two really good reasons to do this. One good reason is because it introduces some selection bias into NANOG. In other words, for the governance part, some people care a lot about this, and some people don't care at all. And the problem is right now, we have a lot of people who don't care at all participating exactly once every long period, which is by voting for people they don't know and don't really care about, because people are up on the podium begging them to do it. And this adds a little bit of sort of people actually have to care at least a minimal amount, and they care by volunteering and getting involved and being paid members. The other issue that has come up repeatedly over time is that network engineering and network architecture seems to be the one professional discipline that lacks any kind of professional membership organization. All the other sorts of disciplines like this, have the IEEE and the ACM, and you've got the ASME, and you've got all these organizations, and a lot of folks would like to be able, for a small fee, to actually put truthfully on their resume that they're a member of a professional organization that's devoted to their profession, and I think there's some value in that.
Bill?
I wonder if you guys could.
Who are you and where are you from?
Sorry, Phil Woodcock from the back row back there. I wonder if you guys could spend a little bit of time talking about your thoughts about the related issues of institutionalization, scope creep, and budget. That is, once this thing is sort of up and running and has staff and a reason to continue making itself bigger and looking for ever more money and so forth, do you allow, for instance, the executive director to set the budget, or do you figure out what achievable fundraising targets are and then tell the executive director that that is their budget? What direction would you see that going?
Honestly, we've been focusing on just making it work for the short term. A lot of the scope creep possibilities, some of them made it into the slides, some of it's been in hallway conversations. I think we need the membership to tell us what the purpose of the organization is, within the limits, of course, of what's in our mission statement and what's allowable to remain a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. There are lots of things that you're not allowed to do if you do that with, I'm sure. A lot of you know already. So within those parameters, there's certainly room to innovate. I think that the board needs to be careful when entertaining any of these notions to understand how they're going to affect budgets and the ability to carry what we're already supposed to be doing. There's definitely a lot of us see something shiny and say, hey, let's go work on that, and we can't allow that to distract us from keeping things working. That's the way I see it. I don't know if anyone else wants to throw in anything.
Hi, Rob Seastrom. I work for Affiliates. I'm on the NANOG steering committee. I almost said Air and AC here. I'd like to thank Woody for coming up and making that point. And the point that he made is the meta point, which is that we've been working on this for about three and a half months now. And we're actually pretty far along compared to most startups I've been at this stage of the making things happen. But there are lots of things that still need to be done, and there are many seats at the table. And there are many people in the community who have background in doing all sorts of stuff. And governance of nonprofits is certainly one of those. And there are a lot of opportunities to help craft this into something that is truly a win by avoiding the pitfalls that people have fallen into in the past. So that's not just me saying, hey, Woody, get up here and, come on, help us make this real. This is me saying that to everyone in this room who's a stakeholder. Please offer what you can in terms of your own particular time and talents and what you can do to help us make this happen.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, then we're going to move forward now with the timeline and budget report, which I believe Sylvie will deliver to us. Before that, though, I want to thank Sylvie and Joe and Mike and Dwayne, who is busy being technical, for the hard work, including a couple hours last night, spent on putting this together so that it actually makes sense to somebody like me. Oh, Joe's doing it. Okay.
Hi. Joe Provo, how's it going? This is the timeline that I believe also was on the review yesterday, just kind of showing where we are now, what's, folks had asked, what's the, when is the ratification? What's going on in terms of getting the buy-in from the community in addition to just the session here? And pretty much is delineated with the election, the normal election cycle that we'll be having in October. And one thing that we've talked about, the logistics hadn't been sorted, but one thing that Merit has come forward and said that they'll help us with is looking at how we can do the parallel elections and actually make sure that everyone who's currently enfranchised in the existing NANOG voting world can help ratify what we're going forward and doing here. What else to say about this? We have a sharp delineation between when the merit activity is, again, as we talked about yesterday and Steve talked about just now, it's all based on the budget cycles. We have a contracted hotel with Alcatel-Lucent as the host for 52 and 53 working with Aaron. Thank you again, JC. For the pro forma budget work, we ran the numbers as two sets, just what we think are some realistic numbers based on past performance, and what we think are pessimistic numbers if we completely trip all over ourselves, and that's also winds up happily being the break-even case.
Microphone, please.
I believe that was Bill Norton. I'm not sure what his current affiliation is, and he was asking how many meetings per year. This is a 3-year pro forma, so that's, year 1 is now. So there are meetings that are operated by Merit during year 1, year 2, next year, meetings operated by Merit and by NANOG, and year 3, meetings operated by NANOG. And the current projection are sticking with the 3 meetings until we get the idea of what's going on.
Okay, Todd Underwood, Google. So one of the related questions is, there have been a large number of loudmouths who want fewer meetings per year and never a great consensus on whether that was what we all wanted to do or not. And those conversations were sort of squashed by Merit, basically saying, we have these overheads, these people exist, they need to be paid. This isn't going to work financially for us, so please don't do that. And so we didn't really seriously talk about it. It's clearly not something that is essential that we talk about now, but one of the things I'd like to see is it true that with a mostly outsourced model, costs scale very differently on a per meeting basis now, rather than having a sort of partial staffing model where they don't scale as nicely that way? Because if the answer is yes, then this becomes we don't have to decide that right now, but it won't be much more expensive to do 2 versus 3.
Well,
to address that, it requires additional sponsorship model elements that we do not currently have. No matter how you slice it, because again, it's the current funding is essentially a hand-to-mouth operation where it is every meeting pays for the meetings that every meeting pays for the set of meetings. So you were asking about some of the specifics there. This is within the realistic assumptions, and they're not. They're not overly optimistic. They're just based on past performance and the current status of work that the marketing working group has been doing. We have assumptions about some of the meeting sponsorships. Again, walking 60-odd people through a spreadsheet is kind of interesting on a large projector. There had been questions about the memberships. I'm just going to take it top down. Questions about the memberships. We had made the baseline assumption that $100 just for the sake of doing a budget. And we presume that in year one we can pick up a number of people who are in the interested participants without actually having to make it coupled with any particular other activity. If Randy's activity earlier was any sign, then that's easy peasy. There's a nominal growth rate as we go based on the attendance and the fact that we have about a third newcomers every time, and presuming that there's a percentage of the newcomers that will tag along and want to actually join the organization. There's a category there called early contributors. We were indicating that for folks who are like Spectrum, who helped us out with underwriting some of the contract issues we've already dealt with, that we would solicit a modest number of corporate contributors to, obviously when we blow out these numbers, the bottom line looks a lot better. And that the individual contributors, we were not decoupling that from the actual memberships, because this is something that it's just getting a thanks and getting a little bit of a banner on the NANOG site saying, hey, thanks for helping us out. Dave, did you want to?
Dave Temkin, Netflix and Marketing Working Group member. So when I look at early contributors and a corporate at 5,000, that makes sense, but at the same time, if we look at the current NANOG model, or based on the merit model of sponsorships, people kind of expect something for that at a meeting, right? We have the vendors who set up out here for breaks, beer and gear, whatever that may be. And while people are relatively generous, and actually, I do think that we probably could find 5 companies in this room that we could get $5,000 out of without it being too big of an issue. That coupled with the next set of line items, which is sponsors, I'll let you speak to that, but that concerns me a little bit because that seems like a pretty far departure from where we are today. I can't think of anyone who we could pump for $50,000. It just doesn't. If we're saying realistic assumptions, that to me is an incredibly optimistic assumption, not a realistic assumption. So the one comment I would leave that with is that, and I don't know if Dan's going to rebut something here, but go ahead, is that the one thing that actually tends to work pretty well today, I would say, actually is how we handle sponsorships. Vendors like the fact that for $4,000 or $5,000, they can get their name out there in the community, they're heard. I feel that if someone's contributing $50,000, they're going to feel almost a sense of ownership over this organization, and we're going to turn into Alka Lu Nog, not be Nanog or Nunog or whatever it may be.
Just as a suggestion, how to tune this up a little bit so that the numbers work out. Dave is probably right that the numbers do high, but you have other numbers that are too low that will actually come up to adjust it. So while the gold, silver, bronze, maybe the dollar signs are too high, the number of sponsorships, particularly at a bronze level of say 10 or 15, will be much, much more than that.
Sure. So if bronze was, say, $5,000, I would make that 1 into potentially a 10, right? So you're going to get more cash in the end. It's more to manage, right? So it is challenging the more sponsors you have to manage those relationships. But if silver is then 10,000 and gold is 20,000, you're going to have maybe 1 and 1 there. But that's still far more cash than if you price it at 50, 40, 20.
Well, there's all good feedback. I do want to say that the gold thing that was ticked off, that was based on the fact that we already get that, that's the most that we pull out, and we currently the NANOG organization Merit gets that from Aaron for the operation of certain video casting and archiving and so
Right.
forth. But essentially, that type of money
Right.
is
But,
not
Aaron
far-fetched.
is a
And
different
again,
animal.
this is an annual.
Right.
That's an annual item. It's not expected to be a repeat.
Well, the other way to sort of recast this is to, have, instead of having sort of annual gold, silver, bronze sponsors and then having meeting sponsors, is to consider totally breaking the current meeting sponsorship model with things like beer and gear and break and badge, and breaking that and making gold, silver, bronze at, say, gold might be something like $35K a meeting, silver might be something like $20K a meeting, bronze might be something like $10K a meeting, but then roll in stuff like you get a beer and gear sponsorship for this one, but not for this one. You get this one comes with a lanyard, this one comes with 2 breaks.
These are all great ideas.
You're basically.
Actually, you just volunteered for the budgeting working group, both of you. Thank you very
Well,
much.
all I wanted to say was
Always happy to
these
do
are
Patrick.
these are just lines on a spreadsheet that you're seeing, and I was going to let CQ address the fact that what they represent are actually pretty much what Dan was just describing.
Right.
But the good news here is that, based on whether you do it this way or the other way, I think there'll be plenty of money.
So,
Hey, Chris, can I just ask one quick question?
Go ahead.
Do we feel that the current model, I recognize we're reforming this as a, new entity, but do we feel that the current sponsorship model is necessarily broken? Do we feel, is the business sustaining based on the current model? Is this something we need to change now, or is this something we need to change going forward once the rest of the organization is all sorted out?
Well, there are something.
you want me to? Please. If I basically answer that as a black and white question, I will say yes. I think there is a need for change. And the breakdown of these sponsorships is comparable to what we're actually kind of collecting today from, say, a single entity who purchases 3 beer and gears through the year.
Right.
What we're basically trying to do is couple some of the items that they are already paid for,
Right.
and give them, per se, a status symbol with participating for 3 NANOGs,
Right.
as opposed to someone who wants to participate for a single NANOG and maybe does a social and a breakout and a beer and gear, and someone who actually wants to participate for 2 NANOGs.
Right.
So we're just taking some of the exact or the existing programs that we have and trying to make them a little more efficient as far as sponsor revenue for NANOG.
Right. I'll stop hogging the mic. Let me just make one comment to that, and then I will gladly sit down. I would be weary of making too many changes around that model. If we feel that we're getting enough cash now to sustain the organization, perhaps we would be much better off keeping the current model until that new organization is fully established and sustaining itself, and then we can phase in changes like this. I would be afraid of sponsors being gun shy and saying, well, if I'm going to dump in $20,000 and I have no idea whether or not this is going to work, then, I may not want to make that kind of commitment.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Again, the dumping in the $20,000 doesn't mean that just basically get a bumper sticker that says, hey, I supported NANOG. They're actually
trying to participate in some of our already existing programs.
I understand that, but again, a lot of vendors may not, they see this as a sponsorship opportunity, and they don't necessarily want to be part of the community. So, and we have to understand that and respect that, a company like Citrix, for example, is a huge company that is willing to spend $5,000 to do some marketing, but doesn't want anything to do with the actual inner workings of NANOG, and may not necessarily want to say, oh, well, we're interested in supporting a fledgling organization. They don't care about that. They just care that they get their name out and they spent $5,000 on sponsoring something. And they have a very strict deliverable that they get. And I'm using them as an example, but this could apply to many of the other, again, Alcatel-Lucent is a great example. This is a big monolithic company that doesn't care about directly impacting this. They want to get their name out there, but they're not going to appoint someone to a board or something that's going to directly contribute to.
No, and I think those are valid points, and actually I feel that we do need the sponsorships to be participants as opposed to just handing us money and going on their way.
There's something to be said for just handing us money, though. That's always helpful. Thanks.
And that's one thing. Dave, before you sit down, we are by and large in this room engineers, and we are falling into a trap here. And I have lost count of how many times I've gotten my busts chopped by CXOs for concentrating on how rather than what. We're doing a deep dive here, and there will be ample opportunity for that. I draw your attention to the word in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, which is, if we are totally on crack and it's the wrong order of magnitude, then yeah, we should probably visit that and visit it quickly. But if it's a matter of squishing numbers around until it works, I guarantee you it's going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. So I'm just, all of your points are well taken, and I agree with some of them that we need to move stuff around, but I don't want us to get down to where we're not seeing the forest for the trees.
I'm not advocating moving stuff around. I'm saying that it may not be worth changing the existing model as part of this transition.
I understand.
That's my point.
I'm going back to your original questions.
I was using that to kind of prove the larger point that maybe it's not worth changing the model.
Okay.
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 Just
Thanks.
one point.
Jay?
Yeah, Jay Hennigan, Impulse Advanced Communications. One thing that was brought up yesterday was that there was a roughly $300,000 budget for one of the meetings that was shown that came within, I think, $1,000 or so of balancing exactly. I also sympathize with the fact that we are mostly engineers and not bankers, and the comment was made that banking should be boring. Therefore, what I would like to see on this slide is this is a proposal apparently for a relatively large change in the way that we're doing things here. What would be useful to me would be to see what the revenue is under the present model and what the differences are. I see gold sponsors at $50,000. I have no idea what Comcast, for example, contributed for this meeting, and whether that's way above, whether that's way below. In other words, what from a strict participant, things seem to have been working reasonably well. I'm happy with the presentation of NANOG as it is. I think that self-governance, it sounds to me like everyone's on board, that that's a good thing to do. I was not as convinced of that earlier. But as far as making radical changes in terms of budgeting and things that should be boring, why are we doing that? It would be interesting for me to see what what's being changed from the way things are being done now.
I can try to answer that.
Yeah.
One thing that changes in a self-governing model is we need to have certain amount of cash to operate on a going basis. Previously, under the Merit governance, that pile of cash was not necessary because Merit dug into its own pocket to advance money for the NANOG activity. Going forward, if we're independent, we don't have deep pockets that will advance $20,000 to pay down a hotel contract in a year's time, arranging and contracting for these conferences. So that is what the sponsorship models allow, is to have a base of cash flow from the beginning, and that becomes your operating cash flow as you are progressing throughout the year.
If I may.
So that's the difference.
However, the need for that is sometime in the future because Merit has already agreed to go forward for the next couple of meetings, correct?
We have paid down hotel for Denver.
It's not.
So it's in a year's time, and
Yeah, the runway is not that long.
Yeah, the contracts have to be put together. Again, just to kind of reiterate all valid points that we just heard, but again, this is over a year. This is 3 NANOGs, not just a breakdown of a single NANOG. So I want you kind of, as you look at these numbers in the columns, each one is 3.
And even though it says realistic assumptions, there's still some pessimistic elements in here. Like you'll see the vendor collaboration room carries forward with 0 when we've actually been getting good traction with that. You know, just as a minor example. But Todd, and then I really hope I could move on from revenue to expenses. Won't that be fun?
Let's see, 2 quick points. One is, I think Sylvie made the most important point, and this is clear that what this is about. This has to be skewed in order to come up with more cash quickly, and so priority should be given to ideas that generate cash. One of the ones that I have heard is companies being able to buy unnamed attendance to all NANOGs for a year just as headcount. Like, you know, NTT has 23 people here. Like, what if they could just buy, 20 people per NANOG for 3 NANOGs and give us the check up front? And many companies would do that. Maybe not NTT or maybe not Google, but like companies that are owned by people who know a lot at NANOG and control a medium-sized group of people who go to NANOG, they could buy like 3 or 4 or 5 seats, and I don't know. So that would generate some money. Did you guys exclude that from this, or it just didn't make it on this projection?
It didn't make it on the pro forma, but we did bat that around, and Sylvie, I'm sure we're...
Okay, I wasn't sure if you guys thought it was a bad idea, or it's just kind of sitting out there, not sure if it generates enough cash. I think it would generate a moderate amount of cash, like on the order of 100,000 to 200,000.
We think it's a great idea. We didn't present it because we wanted to introduce as little change as possible.
Okay.
But these are all discussions that we'd like to have in the working groups.
Yeah, okay, because there's a lot of things when you start tweaking with how, what might influence the attendance. A bunch of the other numbers go in weird directions.
I understand. So please don't drop that one on the floor, because I think it's a pretty good idea.
No, and
I hope it wasn't mine.
And that whole thing about the companies wanting to write a larger check up front, that ties back into like doing the whole metallic labeled corporate sponsorships, because a lot of the experiences that the marketing working group has come up with is, while the small little marketing elements here and there are interesting to some of our corporate friends, a lot of them just want, let me just give you a check and I'm done for the year.
Yep. So on the marketing issue, and then I'll sit down and shut up, but I'm going to say this because I don't think other people have said it, and I know a lot of other people are thinking it, and having worked mostly on the program, I think it. We must find a way to completely insulate the program committee from your marketing activities, and it's been done effectively until now, and I think we have a really robust culture around that, but some of that culture needs to be carefully enshrined in the organizations and the policies we make, because, you can see it around the room when perhaps earlier today there was a little bit more marketing content than people expected and a little bit less technical content than we are used to. People get angry and upset because we win. This is a great conference because of the quality of the technical talks that are selected by the program committee and recruited by them. So we just please continue to make that a priority and keep sort of jackass serious engineers on the program committee who will pee all over the marketing talks and decline them. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was even suggested at one point, I'm not sure if that made it into the next ideas for the bylaw committee to kick around, to actually encode that the marketing group and PC couldn't have members that were cross-pollinating.
Just a clarification question. I'm Bill Norton. Of these revenue items, which of these already exist in their current form and their current prices, and which ones of these are news? I'm guessing that it's the top, top 3 chunks.
The meeting sponsors, that's all what exists.
And the current
So everything
prices.
meeting sponsors and down is what
Yeah.
exists, and we're just making an assumption of, 350 paid out of the 450 attendees.
Gotcha. Everything above that is new
Everything
stuff.
above is all new stuff.
And all those numbers are for the entire year.
Correct. Each column represents a year, which is why it ticks off the meetings up at the top. Oh, boy.
So year one, 48, 49, 50 yields $110,000 of operating cash flow. Year two, you have 220, and year three, 330.
We'll get there when we get to the expenses even. Wow.
Yeah, sorry, Neil McRae from Cable and Wireless. You may already have this, but what I think might help the people in here is a graph with the cash flow on it, just in pure picture format, because that's what I think everyone's asking about.
Yeah, I don't think I can do that right now, but I think we can probably have it. We could probably have it before the meeting's over, maybe. I don't know.
What do you mean by cash flow? Cash flow in my background is a month-by-month in and out flow. What do you envision?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. So it's
I know exactly what
Yeah.
Neil means because we do this on other boards we're together. I'll show you what he means, and he's right. It actually would help. So good suggestion, Neil. We'll put that up on the NANOG website sooner or later, if Sylvia approves it.
Of course.
Okay, nobody else at the mic, so I went ahead and popped this onto the exciting expense sheet. The staffing, we're assuming that we will have to pick up, and we've batted around executive director as the title, assuming it's going to be someone in the 80 to 100K range to actually have the experience and fundraising experience and organizational experience. And this year, we presume we would have to have them for half the year. Additionally, we put line items for support staff, whether or not that's correct. Hey, this is a pro forma, like RS pointed out, so the numbers will need to be tuned as appropriate. Various legal fees, a lot of front loading for doing things involving all the contracts and getting things started this year. These are all pretty straightforward estimates based on simple assumptions of a small footprint operating organization. Let's see, promotional material, what else needs to really be called out? The hotel costs, we worked that out from, that was from historical data, Mike?
It was, I think we took high and low, and then did an average of those to find kind of a baseline, just a number to work with.
Sorry, Neil McRae again, just one thing that looks missing is travel. Obviously, these meetings are all over the place. You're going to have to budget for travel.
Well, under a contracting model for conference services, that's part of the contract.
I think what Neil was meaning is actually for the tiny number of staff, there's still a modicum of travel we need to, and good point.
Good point.
And this is what Sylvia was mentioning, and that we rolling up to the actual summary income side of things. People already went over the gold, silver, bronze assumptions. So if you disagreed there, then you're going to disagree here. Give everyone a chance to stare at the numbers. Everybody stared. Okay. Cash out. The other. Again, the previous slides were showing the items and estimates in terms of a number of units, and this is actually translating that into dollars. So this is where Sylvia was mentioning we actually get to something approximating an annual cash flow kind of detail. Not sure if there's anything here that really needs to be called out.
Just one thing on the I know there's
Neil, go ahead.
mention about the domain name. Maybe we could do a deal with Merit that for $30,000 they could become a member.
Well, Don said a little bit yesterday, but I don't know if he wants to indicate about the whole fair value transfer details. You want to expand on that? That's live. Should be live.
As most of you heard yesterday, we're just interested in documenting a fair value transfer and the terms to be worked out. But we don't want anybody to come back and say, you shouldn't have given this stuff to NANOG, and there's people like that running around the community, and we'll just all be better off.
Yeah, and that's why the line item is brand acquisition, because it is not just a $5 domain registration. It's trademark, it's license, blah blah blah. Yeah. Any other question there? No. Okay. Do people actually want to stare at the numbers, Bill?
No, I guess I'm just trying to understand. So there's an entire year of bookkeeper and accounting where the cost is $1,200 and $5,000.
Stake in the ground. This is a pro forma.
I guess that just jumps out at me, making me ask the question: where did these numbers come from?
Some are hard estimates based on research, things like some of the conference cancellation insurance, things like that, and some of them are swag. I mean, this is a pro forma where we're trying to find the faults. So if that requires a little more detail, or you think that's too high or too low, then some specifics would be useful, Bill.
The legal and the accounting fees are what typically a professional accountant will charge to review your balance sheet and produce your tax every year for a small organization. Like, remember, we're a small organization, so that's well within range. It's about $4,000, so we put $5,000. Legal fees, for the moment, we got the legal fees for free. But the first year there's a lot of incorporation work to be done, especially with the 501c3. So that's why the number is higher on the first year. And then we just plan for having just regular legal, a bucket for legal fees just in case.
Just want to toss in, the legal fees being free really means that they were generously donated by Tom Daly and Dine Incorporated.
Todd?
And actually, I'm glad you guys brought that up, because I wanted to talk for a second about the legal fees, because I think they're a sign of something that's more important lingering in here that I'm not sure people are thinking consciously about. There's a very different sense of responsibility and participation that comes out of a member owned and operated organization that makes people, especially at the beginning, in the sort of spirit of camaraderie and work to be done, willing to do all kinds of crazy things like write checks for medium-sized amounts of money and donate all of the legal fees to register the corporation. And in fact, I think as a board, one of the challenges that I'd like to see you guys do is not just encourage that activity in the Patrick way of running around and badgering people, which is useful, but also have a structure to organize and take in those contributions, so that if somebody has an accountant on their staff and they want to help do some bookkeeping, or if somebody has, the technical stuff will be easy, and it's actually a problem because everybody will volunteer to do server administration to run a website, and we'll have 64 versions of NANOGs and different Zen installations all around the world, and it'll be stupid, but they'll all be in a weird IBGP mesh and load balance for no good reason.
No.
It's gonna suck, right? But the organizational stuff, you guys need a framework so that when someone so this works on the small scale. When Tom Daly says, I got an in-house lawyer, he's got a few cycles, let me help with the corporate registration, you can do that, but you have to follow up on it, you have to make sure it gets done. The board's responsible for that activity. So be thinking about that structurally as well, please.
Excellent points all. I'm interrupting to bring something from the RSC channels, which is very important. Thanks, Dave Temkin. We need to be finished up in probably half an hour because the beer and gear starts, and those people paid 10 grand each for you guys to go around and pick up their tchotchkes. So considering we're talking about sponsors right now, let's not piss them off. If anybody, let's keep it going and get to.
Yeah, now that we've beaten up some of the line items initially, hopefully it'll be more clear as we go through this next one where we're talking about the pessimistic numbers, which actually, curiously enough, wound up, usually you do these things, you try to cook the break-even numbers. When we made pessimistic assumptions, we still made it to the break-even. Minor, like a 10K negative, you'll see at the bottom. But this is the overview, the summary that we kind of blew through on the other set, but just absorb that.
I guess I have to channel what Dave Temkin said earlier. So your pessimistic view is that corporate sponsorships go up 42%.
No, you're
down to 42.
Yeah, no.
This is the breakup. That was just a breakdown.
That's not an up. That's just a bullet.
PowerPoint feature.
That is just a bullet, Bill. It's the same one that's been through all these slides. That's just breaking out what they are. And again, I don't want us to all get eye strains staring at things, but this is, when we're saying pessimistic, we're seriously pessimistic. Our membership drive is not that good. We don't get as many of the as the ongoing sponsors. We screw up in meeting registrations. We only get 250 paid people. We cranked down all the sponsorship values. Absorb. No, nothing's looking rosy here. And the expenses we actually maintained, so that makes it even worse that the number was going. Our revenue's going down. We normally you have a smaller conference, you would book a smaller hotel. We presume we screwed that up too, and we still booked big hotels. So you still get the same footprint cost for the actual event. Do I sense a question coming?
Yes. Charles Gucker, Open Access. I'm trying to work through the numbers based off of, and I do commend everyone for putting this together. I think it's a great initiative. I think it's the right thing to do. But trying to correlate it from past numbers, and I understand I have to take it with a grain of salt, the numbers given in the presentation from the other day from Merit, but there is numbers in here for equipment and supplies. There's stuff for, as mentioned before, the travel. But there's also non-salary type expenditures. And I'm trying to equate, is the non-salary the hotel registration?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's okay.
Non-salary is what you see there: hotel costs, equipment costs, supplies, and also travel.
But the equipment costs are reoccurring. Is that an assumption that we're renting equipment or that the organization has purchased the equipment? And what's happened with the equipment that's already been purchased on behalf of the organization?
Every single meeting, there's an item for, if you look past in the community meetings, it's about 15 to 20,000 for equipment. So we kept that same number and we upped it. We put it at 20, which is the highest value we've seen.
But is that an assumption that we're buying new equipment again, or we're renting
Leasing, yeah. So I mean, like
All of this.
all this AV stuff. That's
Okay.
costs
And that-
money. It doesn't just show up.
Those were really costs that we carried forward from the numbers that we got from Merit.
Okay.
And so they may or may not be exact to the way that it would look in the new organization, but we wanted to carry the cost as much as we could so that it looked realistic.
What's that?
So one of the things we offered was to sell equipment that we don't have any need for through the University of Michigan Property Disposal Office, which will discount it appropriately and so forth. So NANOG are going to decide whether or not they want to buy that or they'd rather just buy new. And they're going to make those decisions. But that offer is on the table for that equipment.
And as Patrick was pointing out, a bunch of the detail about those specifics are in the letters that are all posted on the NANOG site.
So we're being careful not to underestimate any cost. Any high value, we pick the highest value at every single point.
Mike Hughes, Links and PC member. I just also wanted to point out stuff wears out and obsoletes, and you get really cranky if we don't have things like draft end support and other cool stuff when, that kind of stuff. So, equipment does need to be refreshed and updated because it gets broken sometimes or just wears out and obsoletes.
Especially equipment that's shuffled around hither and yon. Bill?
Another clarification question. With the staffing, Sylvie, are you assuming that these are the fully loaded costs? So this 90K is really a person who's probably making 65, 70, and there's benefits and health care and that kind of stuff?
There's a line item
that
for
was
benefits.
just base comp, and so the real number, yes.
You'll see that the benefits are actually a line item.
there. I went a little fast, I'm sorry, on putting the assumptions there. I just wanted, because what we had was the pro forma, and I wanted to highlight all the assumptions because this is unreadable. So.
Yeah, and it's hard to compress it onto something. So
Yes.
the loaded costs were assumed to be benefits, the typical swag of a third
30%
of the salary.
Okay, and these people are working in an office somewhere?
Yes. Or they are on a contract basis.
So one of the things people have been asking about is there's been a bunch of gear that was donated to Merit for the purposes of NANOG. For example, Randy Bush was involved with getting some new servers, and it hasn't been clear whether that gear is going to get moved over to the new organization or if that's going to stay
It's in the
with Merit.
letters. Merit will sell it to us at a discounted rate based on their technology disbursement department's decision of how much that equipment is worth.
Couple light items.
Who are you? No,
Charles.
Tim.
Charles Gucker again.
Well, no, I was going to say let Tim go.
Let Tim go. That's fine.
Please. Yeah,
Tim.
please identify yourself, Tim.
Some call me Tim. I'm Tim Pozar. I'm independent geek. A couple things. One thing is that the credit card transaction seems at 2% seems a little low, just as a point of interest. More like 3%. Where are the line items for the conference project manager? I don't see that. Typically, you said you were going to be hiring out somebody else to do, the contract negotiations, things like that.
As part of the 150 for hosting, there's 110 for a typical hotel and 40,000 for contracting Merit or someone else.
We had to roll up some items just to be able to make it so it's legible.
It's aggregated into
It's
that.
aggregated. If you want, we could totally deaggregate everything. The spreadsheet will be 4 pages long, but we can totally do it.
Wouldn't mind
And that
seeing
can
it
be
because
online.
I've had some experience in this area. It would be interesting just to see if they're, again, in the ballpark.
Again, these are presentation slides, not.
No, I understand.
Thank you for volunteering, Tim.
And so, I'd be glad to see it. And so I assume like the line item for the wireless and network rental would be in that as well? Okay.
That's under equipment.
That's the equipment we were just talking about.
20 grand. Okay, well,
Per
I may
meeting.
want to comment on that when we can do that. And then, for instance, union labor costs for power distribution and things like that, so that's in that 150K?
Union labor cost of who?
Well, typically
we're in New
when
York.
there's additional costs when you do things like, if you go into labor, a hotel that has union labor, these little power outlets are not going to be done by volunteers. They're going to be done by union folks.
So like the next meeting we have in New York where nobody can move anything into elevators without help.
Right, figure you're going to have a line item for union labor on that.
In the current model, that's actually something that the host pays for.
Okay. Just 2 cents on that.
It is, it's in the hotel cost, yes. So it's in the 110 already.
Charlie?
Okay.
Actually, that was just.
I'm sorry you didn't use a microphone, so I don't know what you said. Charles?
Actually, my point was just specific to that there are some professional organizations who do a lot of the marketing, conference organizations, and scheduling. I didn't know if the salaried individual would have that type of responsibility, or they just basically setting the tone, the objectives, the goals, and then disseminate from there for professional services selection or those professional organizations.
Yeah, the executive director would be the person that's actually, managing the RFPs, getting the bids in, that sort of thing.
Hi, Will Hargrave here. I just want to make the point that we're talking about an organisation that's going to turn over $1 million, and standing up here and talking about things that are single digit or less percentages of the total budget is not particularly useful at this stage. Thanks.
Thank you, Will.
Hi, Steve Gibbard. Apologies if I'm jumping the gun on this and it's coming later in the program or anything like that. But just wanted to point out we've got a lot of numbers up here in both the best case and the worst case scenarios that assume that we are running meetings and have a staff to go deal with the stuff and so forth. And there's quite a bit that needs to happen before we get to that point. So my understanding is a lot of people on this transition team have put in some money already. I handed over a $200 check yesterday. Randy Bush handed over his $250 check at the beginning of this. And I think if other people in this room, other people who think that this is a good idea, could do something similar, I think that would go a long way towards getting this off the ground.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Kevin Oberman, ESNet. Once again, we're looking at spreadsheets that have a lot of stuff rolled up into categories, and there's been lots of questions about the items, what's rolled up where, was it overlooked, things like that. I think it would be very good if the steering committee, or, well, I'm not sure exactly what the organization name is appropriately for NANOG, but anyway, if whomever up there who does the work, Sylvie, could make available online, preferably, the detailed spreadsheets so everybody can satisfy themselves that there are no major items of significance that got missed or are outrageously out of line, it would be a really good idea.
Yeah, I don't know if we can guarantee to do it during the meeting, but we're going to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, if you could give me maybe a week, that'd be nice. Okay.
I can give you, I'm not the one who sets the limits, so you know, it's however much you're willing to give yourself, but I do think the sooner the better. Obviously, I don't expect you to spend all night tonight getting them out online. That would be kind of silly, but I would like to see them out there as soon as possible so we can have time to adequately study them and, more importantly, let people who understand numbers better than I do on financial sheets study them.
Well, we can do two different things. Either we publish the sheet that we have right now, which is a working sheet that we have, or, but we have rolled up categories, and I guess that solution would not satisfy the deeply curious that wants to see all the items, but it would be conveying the information right away. And if you give me after that 7 or 10 days to totally break it down, I will do that as well.
Personally, I think 7 to 10 days is just fine. 3 months, probably I'd be very annoyed.
Me too.
Oh, yeah. Dan?
I think one thing that's important here is that this is a directionally accurate budget. The reason this budget was done was to determine if this was doable or not. So you know, it's kind of a check or an X, and we've gotten sort of to a check. This is directionally accurate. You know, the numbers add up properly. I think this is going to be a matter of iteration. In other words, we've got this now. I think 90 days from now, we're going to have a much more accurate budget. In another 90 days, we'll have yet another much more accurate budget. And in a year to 18 months, we'll be able to go to sort of an annual budget cycle where a budget gets sent out at the beginning of the year. And, you know, it's 95 to 98% accurate, you know, for a 12-month period thereafter. I think at this point, I think people need to set their expectations. If they look at this budget and think that 12 months from now, when this gets gone over, that this is going to be accurate, it's not going to be accurate. You know, this is a first pass, and it's only directionally accurate. So what we're going to have is, how many people here belong to a homeowners association? So a good number of people. Now, you get this long, boring homeowners association budget like every year. That's what this is going to turn into, and it's going to look a lot like it. It's going to have line items, and the line items are going to be the same year after year. The reason people know how to build those budgets is they steal them from other homeowners associations, where the developer has done that and gives it to you, and then you figure it out year after year. So there's two things we have to do. One is we have to learn by making a few mistakes, and the other thing is we need to learn by talking to folks from some other associations and doing a few, you know, just qualifying it and you know, yeah, just sort of checking out with people from other associations. But I think that will come. I'm sorry? I think that's a good idea, but keep in mind, with all due respect, sir, a lot of the people on the steering committee on the transition group have been doing it for a long time. In particular, event planning, I think there's a good number of people involved who have done event planning for a living and who know exactly how much stuff costs. So if you look at this and say, well, these are just a bunch of amateurs, it would be right to be concerned. If you look at this and say, well, they've bought in people who've successfully run very profitable events in the past, or who know accounting, or who've been involved with other organizations, they haven't said it, but they have, and I think you should keep that in mind.
Dan, are you saying NANOG's going to come with a community pool for the homeowners association?
There will be a community pool, Raz, but we have something we need to talk about. You're not going to be invited.
No,
Hi, guys. So
can we keep focused? Yeah.
15 minutes, and I got a question from the RC channel, which is, Dinesh actually asked, he's watching this on the stream. Hi, Dinesh. He'd like to know how he can send in a USD check for $200 to $250 when he's got a UK bank account. And I'm sure lots of others of you, in fact, every single one of you is thinking how you can give us money. So if you're here, what you do is you walk up and you hand me a check. If you're not, then you email board@nanog.org and we'll send you the correct instructions on what to do. But I thank everybody for thinking of this. And then finally, really got to stay focused and get done, and no more pool jokes.
Yeah, Dwayne Wessels is our treasurer, and he will gladly take your money. Bill?
I get the sense that you guys want us to open up the checkbooks and start sending money in. I'm getting that fairly strong. You guys may want to consider, though, that a lot of us have only come up to speed on what's going on here relatively soon. So this is the first time we're seeing these numbers. So we might be asking some, specific questions as kind of a clarification, because we're just kind of getting up to speed on a lot of this stuff. We're told that this is actually a done deal, that we're going to be voting on it in a couple months, but this is actually a done deal. So I guess there's just so much turmoil here in what it is that is done and how this is all going to work and what the assumptions are in the model. I'm getting this uncomfortable feeling that we don't really know what the hell we're doing here.
I don't think
Thank
we
you,
would
Bill.
be
We
happy
appreciate
if
that. Can we have the next question, please?
Well, I don't know. I don't get the turmoil
No.
that you're getting, but I obviously
Okay.
have a view bias here. There's not so much a done deal as the fact that there, as we said yesterday, there were timers on contracts that had to be hit, and when we started discussions with Merit about how to do things, they had a right and correct responsibility to their shareholders to be cautious. And that translates to us having to pony up. And so we did.
There is, in fact, a done deal, to me, when you say that contracts have been signed, that this is going forward, and I see a table of Merit and the steering committee, we're all nodding saying, yes, this is going forward. So this is a done deal. I think we need to know what's going on. I don't know that I care about the specific numbers, but I see a lot of these assumptions that I think are highly questionable. The sources of revenue that you had, that top half of that page of revenues, that was a pretty substantial chunk of what you're saying is going to cover the future of NANOG. But those are all untested, untried. You have a group of folks who, there might be some expertise in there that's beyond engineering, but I don't see the sort of, business focus with multiple disciplines that you'd expect to see in a startup company that would, in fact, be funded. So I'm sorry if I'm sounding negative. I guess it's just more, you asked me what the turmoil is. In my mind, the turmoil is just something doesn't sound quite right about this startup that you're talking about with the new NANOG. And maybe a lone fold. I hope Dan's going to tell me everything's going to be fine. We've done the numbers. We've done thousands of conferences amongst this group of folks. But as far as I can tell, there's only one group that's actually done these types of conferences on an ongoing basis in all the disciplines required, and that would be Merit.
You say that as a former Merit employee, Bill?
Oh, come on, Dan.
No, the reason I say that, Bill, is because I think what you said was largely a cheap shot. The fact is that maybe you feel you were consulted or something, but there have been a lot of people who've been bought into this beyond the people who are up on the stage, who do have a lot of experience, who are CEOs, who have a lot of executive experience running yes, technology companies. There have been people bought in who spent a lot of time running events. These numbers are not stuff that has been plucked out of the air. Now that being said, I don't think they're 100% accurate. I mean, I'll be the first one to say I don't think they're 100% accurate, but I do think that I don't think this is a done deal. But I do think that you can't sort of throw stones in the way you're throwing them, because I don't think you're being particularly constructive. If you have a suggestion for what to do, make it. But I just think what you're doing is kind of wrong.
Specifically, I think there's an easy way to move forward, and that is have not volunteers running this thing, but perhaps have this new organization be simply a pass-through, where the first couple of years you guys are simply hiring Merit to do this. So you get the oversight that you want, you get the control that you guys want, and you continue the continuity with an organization that's been doing this for a while. And then, yes, you can certainly outsource to an alternative organization, but I'm a little concerned that we're adding a lot more costs.
Merit's not the only one that
I was
runs
going to say,
conferences.
how do you describe us hiring Merit as not outsource? Yes, that's what we have been talking about. Please, we're getting down to 13 minutes.
Bren Provo, Comcast. And I want to applaud all of you on the stage because you have been answering questions on the mailing list, much like Bill's bringing up again today. And I know many people answered his questions on the mailing list weeks ago, including myself. This is not something brand new. This is something you yourself dug out of the archives that's been bantered about for years. I think there's been a transparency issue with Merit, and unfortunately we have not been able to overcome it in the past 5 years since the major transition period. This makes sense to me. I understand all those numbers are swags. They should be at this point. You're upset about this seeming like it's a done deal. They've taken a swag to help put out the brainstorm for the collective audience here. That's what it is. And we elected our leadership on the stage to do the right thing, to steer us in the right direction. This is the way we should be moving towards, a little bit more self-governance. We shouldn't be waiting another 4 or 5 years. That won't fix any of our issues today. It may make them worse.
I think we can agree on the broad strokes. I'll grant you that. I guess the reason I'm hot under the collar, Ben, is I don't like the way that this thing came forward. I think we could have done a lot better job on the Merit side and on the DSC side. I think if we had a documentation trail for what the issues were that led us down this path, then you'd have the entire audience, the entire membership going along down the path with you. We'd all be in hand saying, yes, this is the right approach, and all the right things are happening, and then
Bill,
everything would be
you
fine.
are the only one standing up there saying that we're not doing the right thing right now.
Yes, Neil McRae from Cable Wireless.
Bill, I think you've had enough time right now. We have to move on. You can talk to me in person if you would like, or any other steering committee member. We have less than 10 minutes to go before our sponsors who paid for half of this NANOG would like us to go visit them. Can we please wrap it up?
So I'd just like to say that actually the opposite. So I get to NANOG once a year. I'm not that close to the community. But actually I think what's being presented here is actually, for the stage that it's at, I think it's in fairly good shape. There's a few things you need to tweak, but that's, you know, these guys are sitting in front of 100 venture capitalists all wanting us to put their money in. If any of you have done that, and I have, it's not easy. So I think these guys have done a particularly great job. And certainly my organisation wants to be one of the first corporate sponsors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I do want to say that while we were joking around about open up your checkbook, blah, 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 we do not yet have our 501(c)(3) status, and while there are retroactive ways in which you can get tax deductions, we cannot guarantee if you're giving us any, and since we haven't ironed out any membership things, you know, if you give us any money now, you get our thanks and our gratitude and your name posted on a wall of thanks.
So to be clear, if you donate now as a person, your charitable deduction is not guaranteed unless 501(c) status is approved, and then it's charitable retroactively. That's fine. If a corporation donates, then it's a normal expense, and you can go ahead and do it. So, for instance, this check says RGNet LLC, so he's probably going to deduct that, which is perfectly fine, and that's legal under U.S. law. If you donate from outside the U.S., all bets are off. I have no idea what happens.
I'd also like to make one more comment regarding the done deal issue. if we're going to make this work, there was stuff that we had to start a month or two ago, and we started it, and a lot of us put our own personal funds and time and effort on the line to make it happen. If for somehow this all fails and you guys vote that this is a bad idea in October, then we're out a bunch of money, but that's about it, really. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think the work we're putting in is worth it.
In case anybody was curious, you can go to NANOG and find out who the sponsors were. I mean, there were some people who have already donated. Every single member of the transition team has put their own money into this.
Just on Steve's last point, from my perspective, I don't think you can vote no in October. I think by then it's far too complicated to unwind.
Just one quick one. Andy Barrett from Telcordia. If you could put on the website a postal address as you get one for those of us who don't actually own a paper checkbook. We do like I do everything through bill pay.
We can do that.
That'll be addressed shortly.
We'll do that, and do not be afraid that it is actually in, yes, Moscow, Idaho, okay?
And we're closing up on 5 minutes, so unless there's huge demand, I don't see people, continuing to clamor for the mics. Do want to say, how can you help? How can you shape the vision? We have started to spin up various working groups to actually address things like the bylaws and governance, membership question. What is it going to be? Are there going to be multiple levels? Are there going to be multiple options? The whole question about the funding and sponsorship, that's run in parallel with the existing marketing working group. Talk to CQ. He will be able to point you in that direction. Finance budget working group. If you think you know numbers better than I do, and you probably do, then talk to Dan. Raz, RS, and Tom Scholl are going to be working with the Merit staff to address the technical transition issues of like back-end databases and so forth. And with that, JC.
Yeah, real quick. I think someone better than I said this yesterday.
Who
John
are you?
Curran, Aaron. I wasn't here. I was on United Airlines trying to get here. But Aaron does have a position, per se, with respect to this transition. Aaron does consider a viable operator forum in the region to be an essential requirement for Aaron to do its mission. To that end, we assisted with, for example, the October contract when it had to be signed for the joint meeting. We stand by willing to help once this organization knows what it needs and in what form. Obviously, the goal is that NANOG be a self-sufficient, wonderful organization, but for transition purposes, this is too important a function to let fail. So, yeah, that's it.
Thanks, John. See you all at Beer and Gear.
I actually just want to add something about what John said, is Aaron has been amazingly helpful and supportive, and they have said, the chairman and the CEO have both said they are not trying to cherry pick NANOG as their own conference to pull into Aaron. So I can't, personally, as a board member, I can't thank them enough for both stepping up to the plate and co-signing contracts, but then doing it knowing that this doesn't become Aaron-nog. So that was really good and nice of them, and I think we all owe them a debt of thanks.